Hi everybody and welcome back to Be Like Christ. In today's video I want to talk to you about breaking bad habits. I was reading a book a little bit ago and it's by a guy named James Clear, and James Clear is a habit expert. He wrote this book called Atomic Habits and it's pretty good. And part of the reason it's so good is because it ties back to the Bible in a lot of ways. I'll link it down below if you want to get it. It's all about changing habits that you don't like and how to pick up new, better habits. You know, if we have a bad habit that we want to break, in particular, what I want to focus on is a sinful habit. A lot of times we think, well, if I just had more self-discipline, that's what I really need. Or maybe somebody comes up to you and says, if you just had more self-discipline, you could overcome that. And while that's true, there might be a better way to approach it by actually taking a step backwards and addressing the environments that we're in that lead us into those temptations. I want to read you a section from this book that I think ties in really well with the scriptures. Mr. Clear writes, "The idea that a little bit of self-discipline would solve all our problems is deeply embedded in our culture. Recent research, however, shows something different. When scientists analyze people who appear to have tremendous self-control, it turns out that those individuals aren't all that different from those who are struggling. Instead, disciplined people are better at structuring their lives in a way that does not require heroic willpower and self-control. In other words, they simply spend less time in tempting situations. The people with the best self-control are typically the people who need to use it the least. It is easier to practice self-restraint when you don't have to use it all that often. So yes, perseverance, grit, and willpower are essential to success, but the way to improve these qualities is not to wish that you were a more disciplined person, but by creating a more disciplined environment." He goes on and he says, "To put it bluntly, I have never seen someone consistently stick to a positive habit in a negative environment. A more reliable approach is to cut bad habits off at the source. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it." When I read this, I thought, this is absolutely correct. And I knew it on several levels. There was first a personal level. I knew that this was true. For example, today and yesterday in the office. Yesterday, I ate 4 cookies in the office. And today I ate 3. I really try to avoid cookies. And if there aren't cookies on the table next to my desk, I won't eat them. I won't go seek them out. I won't go find them. I won't go to the store and buy them. And the reason is because there's a barrier there. It's a little bit more inconvenient for me to obtain those, and so it's easier to avoid. But when those cookies are moved into my environment right next to my desk and all I have to do is reach over and grab one, it's a much more tempting environment, and I have to practice self-discipline all day long in order to avoid the cookies, which clearly I failed to do. Now, this man who wrote this book is a habit researcher, and he's basically considered an expert on this topic. But what's amazing is that Jesus in the Bible and his apostles and the message that he was bringing gives us this exact same message 2,000 years ago. Think about what Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. He says, "Evil companions corrupt good morals." If you have friends who like to get into trouble, when you hang out with those friends, you're probably going to have to practice self-discipline more often because of the environment that you're in. It's not that being around those people is inherently evil, but they create a bad environment. If you changed your environment and hung out with your church friends instead, or read a book at home instead, there would be much less of a need to practice self-discipline, and therefore it'd be easier to do what was right. Paul also writes, "Make no provision for the flesh." The idea of making provision is kind of to make ready, and I think this is applicable here. Don't make ready an environment that you're going to then put yourself in that's going to encourage you to sin, or that is going to require you to have to use more self-discipline to avoid temptation, resist it, than you're up for. So how can we apply this to the Christian life? It may be that you have a real problem wasting your time, right? Not redeeming the time because you love to play video games all the time. Well, maybe you need to change your environment. Rather than leaving that Xbox plugged into the television so it's so accessible to power it on and play, maybe every time you put that thing away, you wrap up all the cords and you put it in the back of the closet. That way when you come home, it's not as easy for you to give in to that temptation. There's a barrier there. Maybe you love junk food or ice cream way too much to the point where it's actually gluttonous. And it's so easy for you to give in to that temptation because every time you go to the store, you pick up a pint of ice cream and it just sits in your fridge. Well, maybe what we have to do is change our environment then. when you go to the store, you don't buy those things, so they're not easily accessible. And so to get ice cream, you actually have to leave your house, and it's much less tempting when you have to leave your house to get ice cream than when it's within arm's reach. I know this from personal experience. Don't invite your boyfriend or girlfriend over. Sorry, I was falling over. Don't invite your boyfriend or girlfriend over to Netflix and chill if you know that you're going to be tempted sexually, right? Go somewhere out in public. Change the environment and mitigate the temptation. If you're a bad steward of your money and you spend all your money at the mall and you never have anything to use in the Lord's work, well, maybe you have to make a rule that you can only go to the mall once every month. And then you tell your friends about that rule so they don't pressure you to go more often. Maybe you neglect your wife or your husband because you have a technology addiction. Maybe that means that you don't take your phone everywhere you go anymore. You got to change your environment and leave that thing on the couch so that you spend quality time with him or her. Maybe you have an addiction to pornography and your laptop allows you to go anywhere in the house or anywhere and view things that you shouldn't. Well, if you got rid of the laptop, changed your environment, and got a desktop and put it in your living room, bet you wouldn't be as tempted as often as you are with your laptop. If you can't stop prioritizing your job and your success and your future and all the money that you're going to make over Christian living, then maybe it's time to change your environment. Stop going to those business conferences where there's a bunch of people who prioritize their job over everything else, and maybe attend a Bible lectureship. So I want you to think really hard about what are the environments that I really struggle in, and how can I change those so that the temptations that I always run into in those environments, that I always fall prey to, can be limited. And so, I know I don't have a whole lot of self-discipline for fill in the blank. So how do I keep myself from getting in a situation where I'm going to be continuously tempted with that issue? And we'll close with one more section of this book, but I want to emphasize that this is an idea that comes out of the Bible, but I think he puts it very well. And so I'll read you this and I'll close with this. Self-control is a short-term strategy, not a long-term one. You may be able to resist temptation once or twice, but it is unlikely that you can muster the willpower to override your desires every time. Instead of summoning a new dose of willpower every time you want to do the right thing, your energy would be better spent optimizing your environment. This is the secret to self-control. Thanks everybody for watching. I'm using a new microphone today. I'm really hoping it's going to work so I don't have to refilm this. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, do that down below. And let me know in the comments if there are any examples that you can think of environments that we can change or manipulate in our lives to limit the amount of temptation we have to face. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching.